We're going to begin in Gaza, where the UN says that Israel may have committed war crimes during its raid on Al-Nuseirat refugee camp on Saturday. The United Nations Human Rights Office has questioned whether international humanitarian laws were observed when Israeli forces raided the camp in Central Gaza on Saturday to free 4 captives. 274 Palestinians were killed and more than 700 were injured. The UN also says war crimes may have been committed by Palestinian armed groups, and they include the detention of captives in densely populated areas. We're going to head to Central Gaza. We're going to speak to Tareq Azzoum outside the Al-Aqsa hospital in Deir el-Balah. And the Al-Aqsa hospital is where many of the victims of that attack are being taken. Talk to us about what's been happening.
Well, what we really hear from those victims and even from the injuries is absolutely devastating. We're talking about at least 698 Palestinians being wounded from the attack that was carried out by the Israeli Special Force in Nuseirat refugee camp in order to release 4 Israeli captives. Now, we've been talking to a number of injured people. They have been describing the general atmosphere where they have been injured, and one of them has been saying that we were getting ready to eat as we suddenly heard loud explosions as we saw dozens of Israeli helicopters firing and opening the fire against multiple areas in the Nuseirat refugee camp, and later on we heard the sound of the Israeli tanks as we start hearing from people that there is a special force operating in Nuseirat refugee camp. And later on, this special force has stormed this injured person's house. He has arrested his father and his grandpa, and at the same time, one of the Israeli Special Forces soldiers have opened the fire against him, where he has been shot in his chest and in his abdomen, being now receiving treatment in Al-Aqsa hospital. And this is one of the critical conditions that resulted from a Nuseirat refugee attack that was carried out just 2 days ago. Now, the grim reality is not only that this case, but general cases who are right now in a very desperate need for advanced surgeries, and they are unable to leave Gaza in order to get treatment due to the Israeli foreclosure of borders and the ongoing control of a Philadelphia corridor. And the grim reality day by day is exacerbating in light of the chronic shortage of basic medical supplies, as there are some injured people are unable to afford for them different kinds of medications that are essentially required in order to help them to recover as soon as possible. But people are still afraid due to the collapse of the sense of safety across the strip and areas also that were designated by the Israeli military to be safe zones.
Tareq, thank you very much indeed. That's Tareq Azzoum bringing us up to date from outside the Al-Aqsa hospital in Deir el-Balah in Gaza. Well, I'm joined now from Geneva by Jeremy Laurence. He's spokesperson for the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. So the allegations are being made that war crimes may have been committed by Israeli forces during this particular raid, but also by Palestinian fighters as well. Can you describe to me how you gather evidence for allegations like that?
Yes, hi, and thank you. So we're monitoring closely what's happening on the ground, and we assess information that comes in. Now, as your correspondent has said, during the operation on the weekend, hundreds of Palestinians, many of them civilians, were reportedly killed and injured. Our concern is it's the manner in the way in which this raid was conducted in such a densely populated area in Middle Gaza. This seriously calls into question whether the principles of distinction, precaution and proportionality, which are bedrocks of the laws of war, were respected by the Israeli forces.
In terms of the allegations that are being made against Palestinian fighters, again, how is it that you are able to assess the situation in order to be able to gather evidence to suggest that war crimes may have been committed in that case?
Okay, so the same applies, and when it came with respect to the Palestinian armed groups, they are continuing to hold hostages. Now, the taking of hostages under international humanitarian law is forbidden. It's a serious breach. Beyond that, we have the holding of hostages in densely populated areas. So you're not only putting the hostages themselves at risk, but also Palestinians at risk. All these aspects that I've raised could be amount to war crimes.
So when you make the assessments that you've made for both sides, what do you then do with that evidence? And also, what constitutes evidence that could be presented in a form that would allow a case to move forward?
Well, quite simply, our office gathers information and we know what the laws are. The international humanitarian laws are quite clear. We then make sure that all parties, abide by those laws which are set out under the Geneva Conventions. Then we assemble the information. We will call out if we see an issue with respect to adherence to these laws, and then this information can be passed on to international tribunals.
To a certain degree, it comes down, and please forgive me, but I don't understand how this system works, but I get the sense that there is an element that is open to interpretation, that the UN will make an assessment based on the criteria that you have put forward, but of course the Israelis and the Palestinians may come back and say, no, that is not how this worked actually on the ground. This is simply a broad assessment of a broad picture that was seen. How confident can you be in the evidence that you're presenting that the case is actually representative of what you've been seeing on the ground?
Okay, so in the case of the weekend's operation, as your correspondent said, there were 270 people killed. Now, 4 hostages were freed in the process. We welcome the fact that they've been freed. They should never have been taken in the first place. But what we saw was a mass destruction and a massive amount of killings. So there's that aspect. All we simply do, we will collect evidence and then pass it on to a relevant, competent court, if need be. And they will take the decision based on the assessment that we have made.
Jeremy Laurence, it's very interesting to get your assessment of this and the benefit of your expertise in this. Thank you very much indeed for being with us on Al Jazeera.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.